Hey up everybody, my name's Joshua Morrison, Director of Johnny Moz's Lessons in Confidence, and today I want to talk a little bit about sadness, a feeling that's quite universal. I think we can all say for certain that we have experienced sadness in some form or another, right? I personally have gone through sadness, various times of sadness, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm going to call chronic sadness for the sake of this video, right? You could call it depression if you wanted to. I'm going to try and avoid using the term depression for a fair bit of this video because, at least in my head, depression kind of implies like a clinical depression, which could be solved with medication. And I don't think that chronic sadness can be solved with medication. I don't think it's a mental health issue in terms of it being like, when people think of mental health, they think of something that you're born with or that you're going to have for a very, very long time. PTSD, schizophrenia, right? Autism, ADHD, right? Bipolar disease, whatever it's called, right? All of these things are mental health issues, right? And, a physical equivalent of them would be very, very damaging, right? It would be something that you would have for a long, long time and, it would require you going to the hospital, right? These are severe mental health issues, right? Chronic sadness, I wouldn't put in the same camp as those sort of things like schizophrenia or anything like that. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth talking about. It doesn't mean that, just because you haven't been diagnosed as depressed, just because you haven't been diagnosed as having anxiety disorder or anything like that, doesn't mean that you might not have your own personal issues going on. And those will impact you all the same, whether you get a doctor to tell you that you're depressed or not, right? And, for some people, that route works for them, right? And this isn't an anti-medical sort of video by any stretch of the imagination. But for people that maybe feel like they're probably not like clinically depressed, but they still maybe feel like there's something a little bit wrong with them in the brain, this video is for them and for you, and also for me, because I have suffered with chronic sadness for quite a long time. I've realised some of my favourite moments in my life, right, were bookended with little bits of sadness here and there, right, and intertwined, like it's peppered in, are little sadnesses, right. So, for instance, my favourite memory, in recent memory anyway, is two of them actually, is going to see King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard in concert in Lithuania, in Vilnius. I went for 3 nights, and each night was very different and very satisfying. And my other good memory is going to Abbey Road and recording a load of stuff at Abbey Road, right? But I know that underneath the positive memories and the nostalgia that I have for these events, underneath those were little issues. Like I remember the first day of going to see King Gizzard, right? My girlfriend wasn't there on the first day. She was there on the second 2 days. I remember the whole time thinking, I wish she was here, I also remember I was trying to find the bog when I first got in, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I eventually found it, and it's not that it was disgusting. It was certainly like hygienic, but it certainly wasn't a very nice toilet. It's in a prison, you see. It's in an old prison where they were playing the venue, and the toilets weren't great. I remember during that trip, there were times where I felt quite down for various reasons. For instance, the prices were a lot higher than I thought they would be. I didn't really find any sort of shops that I wanted to go to. The cosmonaut fucking museum that I wanted to go to was shut, right? All of these things and they kind of got to me, right? And I was a little bit sad, but the actual experience of going to the concert completely undermined all of that sadness and made that sadness irrelevant, right? And similarly with Abbey Road, I remember there were a few times when I was at Abbey Road and I was just sitting there, and I remember feeling really, really bad, and feeling bad that I felt bad because fucking hell, I'm recording at Abbey Road. It's one of the coolest things I'm ever going to do, And I feel sad. Why do I feel sad? That's not right, So what I'm trying to get at is that with this chronic sadness, as I'm calling it, right, it's that, everything feels a little bit harder, a little bit less fulfilling, a little bit less pleasant, right? And as history, as the present becomes history, as your present becomes your past, right? You start to glorify old moments that perhaps weren't, great times, but represent something in your mind. Maybe it's innocence, maybe it's a, simpler time, that kind of thing. But back in those exact moments, life was very, very stressful or chaotic or sad or whatever. Or maybe you were going through something that you've kind of written out of your own mind, All of these different things can get to you, right? I mean, for instance, 2017 is a year that I look back on really fondly, right? I always think of 2017 as being one of my favorite years on this planet, right? And I've got an old journal, and I was journaling through 2017. And I looked through some of my old journal entries and I realized I was actually not that happy during that time. I was actually more unhappy and chronically sad than I am now. I was certainly more unstable than I was now, right? And making impulsive decisions that I wouldn't make in this present moment, right? And that, to me, is representative of the fact that happiness can exist alongside chronic sadness, right? For instance, I've spoken to people who have depression, right? And often depression is kind of defined as essentially being not sad, right? But sort of uncaring, right? People who are depressed, one of the common stereotypes is they sit there and just stare at the ceiling for hours, right? And that's a true stereotype because people who've been depressed have told me that they've done that exact thing. And I've always sort of thought, sure, it's a bit of a waste of time. I imagine, because I've certainly stared at ceilings for half an hour or something like that. But, if I was ever there for in bed or whatever, or on the sofa for a longer period of time without the energy to get up and do something because I felt chronically sad in that moment, particularly sad in that moment, it would be intertwined with a little bit of going on the phone or, looking around the room or, I don't know, getting up to go to the bog or standing up and changing the light, to a different color or something like that. Just little things would change along the way, right? It wouldn't be literally just a pure block of just staring at the ceiling. Now, I don't know because I haven't been in those people's private moments where they were staring at the ceiling for hours at a time, if they're counting that stuff. Are they counting, going on their phone for a little bit and just sort of staring at it like this? Are they counting, the time that they got up and went to the toilet? Or do they count it as two separate occasions of sitting there staring at the wall, broken up by a quick break, Or for instance, when I've been in my particularly most sad times, right, I would generally just run a bath, right, and just have loads of baths, right, even if I didn't need them. Just sitting there, just in a bath, because the feeling of running a bath makes you feel like you're productive. The feeling of getting in the bath feels quite nice. That feeling of getting in a bath that's not as hot as it could be, and then turning the hot tap on and then feeling it slowly get hotter and hotter like you're a frog in boiling water. That feels really, really nice. What doesn't feel as good is after you're in the bath for a decent amount of time, you've washed your body, washed your hair, and then you start to feel the water returning to room temperature. That's never a particularly nice feeling. I try and get out of the bath before that happens. But it's part of this overall thing, right, of you're sad, you're unmotivated, you feel like a failure, you feel like you're not, living up to your max, your potential, right? And so you try and escape in some way, for now, we've got all of these scrolling devices, Twitter and TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and whatever, all of these different things are there to distract you and from, looking inwards in a constructive way. Because as we're going to talk about in the next sort of segment of this, you can look inwards too much, and that's called rumination. And you can eventually start to loathe yourself because you've got this sort of dialogue in your head. And we will get to that. But in the meanwhile, I just kind of want to define what this chronic sadness could be, right? If I had to give it some real definition, I would consider it, right? This isn't a great dictionary definition, like the Webster's Dictionary or anything like that, but imagine this. You're at the pub with a few friends, right? And you're there, you're kind of excited to go, But as you're sort of on the journey, you have these sort of creeping feelings of like, oh, it's going to be terrible, this, I'm going to hate it. What if the conversation isn't nearly as lively as I think it's going to be, as how we used to be in the past? What if we've now grown up and everything's, about to fall apart, and this is like the last time I'm ever going to see this person again? What if turns out they, find me boring now, whatever, all of these sort of things, anxieties start to get in there, and I try and shut them out and just go, don't worry, Josh. It's all right, none of that stuff is going to happen. I'll tell you what, even if it did happen, you would have the self-righteousness to think, yeah, bollocks to that person, I'm going to forge my own path in the future. So don't worry about it. So I try not to worry about it. And I get into the social situation, I get to the pub, and I get my drink, and I sit down at the table. Usually I'm like the first one there. So I'm sitting there waiting for a bit. And at this point, I'm usually kind of like anticipating it, I'm anticipating who am I going to see first, I saw so-and-so said in the group chat they're on their way, and I know they live there, and I know that other person, they haven't said they're on their way yet, but they're usually quite punctual and they live nearer, so I might see them first. So you're kind of thinking all these little things, right? And then when you meet up with the first person, you have a little bit of a one-on-one, right? And you're having a nice enough time. And then the rest of the group kind of pile in, and eventually proper conversations start going back and forth. And I'm not particularly good in like large groups. I've been speaking about this with a few of my friends. I've sort of asked people, what's your favourite number of people to hang out with at a certain time? And for me, it's 3, as in me, one person and one other person. I like groups of 3, maybe 4 if it's the right combination. But I feel like after 4, the dynamic changes a little bit, right? After 4, it starts to become sort of 2 groups, sort of conjoined at the hip. And, you're in these situations and you're looking around and you're just kind of like, you start to become quiet, you start to withdraw, you start to hear the conversation, but not actually what the people are saying. So you're sitting there trying to think of some way that you can enter the conversation, and you're not really figuring out a right way of doing this. So you kind of go, oh, what do I do? Well, that to me is what chronic sadness is, right? That's an example of it. Chronic sadness is, as it says, chronically just a little bit miserable, a little bit unhappy, a bit of a miserable bastard, a bit of a mopey sod, Not necessarily melancholic, not necessarily, nostalgic, not necessarily sort of, that's a good saying, a good way of describing it actually. Bit, yeah. Oh, how's that? Oh, yeah. How was your trip? How was I don't know, so-and-so doing? Oh, they're good. How are you? Yeah. It's like that. And I think there are 2 main factors that are involved in this. And we're going to talk about those very soon, very now. So there are internal and external factors that can influence sadness, right? So these are internal and external. So internal is stuff within the mind, within the brain, right? This is stuff that is caused by you, that's influenced by you, and is judged by you, right? So these, for instance, are, for instance, a feeling of self-loathing, right? That's a brilliant example of an internal factor, right? And then there are external factors, and these are, things from outside of you, right? So right now, the thing that I'm sat on, there's a little bit of bird shit, just like right next, like right down here, right? So I've got to be quite careful with where I place my leg, right? And that obviously is a very silly example of an external factor. But I'll tell you what, if I got shit on these new jeans, I would be quite sad, right? Yeah. So that's an example of an external factor, right? Now, I personally believe that this all comes down to balancing your internal and your external factors, right? And figuring out what it is they are, right? External factors are generally a lot easier to figure out, right? For instance, I've heard people sort of say, X, Y, and Z political event caused me sadness because it caused something bad to happen in my material world, right? ULEZ, for instance, a lot of people I know don't like ULEZ because they had to go out and get a new car, right? Or when Donald Trump became president of America, I've got some American friends that are very unhappy about that, right? So it's all kind of the same thing. An external factor has caused sadness. Why has this external factor caused sadness, right? Well, it's because those external factors are causing you material harm in the real world, and that material harm in the real world causes sadness, right? And that's essentially allowing all this mildew of internal factors to get at you, right? For instance, let's take an example like Roe v. Wade. That got overturned in the last couple of years, didn't it? Right? And that's basically the right to have an abortion, right? So say if you live in a state now where you don't have the right to have an abortion, right? And you end up pregnant, right? That is an external factor that is causing you a load of grief, right? Because say you wanted to get rid of the thing, right? Now you're kind of stuck, right? Apparently they crack down on people like crossing state lines to get abortions and all this sort of stuff. So you kind of got to be a lot more, there's a lot more worry that goes into your head as a pregnant woman living in whatever state, forbade having abortions compared to whatever state allows you to still have abortions, right? So two basically identical women with identical mindsets, right, are now in two entirely different parts of America, and they are having completely different reactions to something that's natural that's happened to them, right? So that to me is a good example of an external factor. This isn't about like pro-life versus pro-choice or whatever. You like Trump or you don't like Trump. That's not what this is about, right? If you don't like him, then whatever, political thing has happened, right, in your area that's caused you a load of grief, that's an external factor, okay? And an internal factor is generally a lot harder to define than an external factor. With an external factor, you can point at that guy who's an arsehole and go, yeah, he's causing me a load of grief. My boss is causing me a load of grief, right? All sorts of things like that cause you a load of grief. And grief, in this sort of sense, is hardship, right? And hardship generally makes you feel a bit sad, right? It might make you feel accomplished once you've done it if it's worthwhile, right? For instance, I put up a shelf recently, and I felt quite accomplished having done it, right? Not that it's a particularly hard thing to do, but I felt good having done this bit of work. There was a bit of a hardship, right? It's not like I can just click my fingers and bam, the shelf is just right there, you know what I mean? So, that's an internal sort of fact. That's a bit of hardship, right? Compare that to, say, the pregnant woman in the red state, right? Or the state that doesn't allow abortions, right, anymore. Now, they've got to go through so much hardship, that's unnecessary hardship, right? For no reason, for no good reason, right? And that is a good example of an internal factor that has been influenced by an external factor. And generally, an internal factor has been influenced by an external factor. And when internal factors are just working on their own, that's generally when depression, the clinical thing starts to wade its ugly head around the corner, right? If you've got a load of internal factors to your sadness that you can't pin on external factors that are in your material world, or hell, even just on the news or on your phone or whatever, the doom sort of thing of everything sort of going a bit rotten lately and slipping into fascism and all that sort of stuff. That's all on the phone. But at the same time, looking at your phone is still a material thing. It's still part of your material world. So, if you're surrounding yourself with all these external factors, right, you're still going to be internally quite sad because of the internal factors. You see a news story, I don't know, innocent kid gets murdered by the police for no reason, right? You see that, you go, oh, bloody hell, that's a bit sad, isn't it? Oh, he was only 15. Oh, that's a shame. And then you go in the comment section and you see that, like, there's a load of people going, yeah, he fucking deserved it, He should have been shot sooner, right? It's a miracle he even made it to 15, right? And then that makes you a little bit more sad because you're like, wow, not only has this bad thing happened, but it seems like people are just supporting it. It's just like, wow, they're glad this kid's dead. What's going on with that, right? Obviously, this is an extreme example, right? And this is not a real example. I'm not basing this off of like Alex Pretty or whatever the recent sort of political events are, right? I mean, maybe subconsciously I am, but realistic, like for the point that I'm making, it's just a case of you see bad things out in the world and that makes you feel sad, right? Even just down to this bit of pigeon shit here, right? That makes me a bit sad, right? Well, it doesn't make me feel immediately sad. It makes me feel sad via the sort of thought process of, oh, now I've got to keep my leg here and not accidentally touch the bird shit. And oh God, what if I touch the bird shit? Oh no, I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. There's a river down there, but I know that the river's a little bit polluted and not very nice. I don't know if dipping my hands in that's going to be very good for me. okay, well, I could probably, make my way to the nearest pub, which I think is about half a mile that way. Oh God, that's a bit of a trek, isn't it? Ooh, all of this is overthinking, right? This is, catastrophizing, right? All due to a simple external factor, right? An example external factor, right? And my brain, at least, seems to work in this sort of catastrophizing sort of way, right? My brain, for instance, loves to make up little scenarios in its head, right? Well, in my head. I'll be walking along going to see someone and I'll just imagine that they've betrayed me in some horrible way and that they're laughing at me, and going, oh, how could you have ever trusted me in the first place? Ah, you fucking idiot. All of that sort of stuff. And that makes me feel bad. It makes me feel anxious. It makes me feel like, distrustful of people. And they haven't done anything wrong. It's all within my brain. That's all an internal factor, right? Is that catastrophizing? It might be caused by an external factor, right? Say I'm going to meet a mate, right? And earlier on in the day, I saw some study that said, I don't know, 80% of people that you think might be alcoholics turn out to be alcoholics, right? And I get to the pub where I'm meeting this guy, right? And then I see him have a drink, right? And I'm like, fuck, what if he's an alcoholic, right? And then I start catastrophizing, right? Oh God, well, I'm definitely sure that I saw him get a bit drunk like about 4 weeks ago. And I know he sent a message the other day that, he was apologizing for being drunk at some sort of party. Oh God, what if he is an alcoholic? No. And then how does that come back around to me? I can't do anything to help him. I quit drinking. Does he want me to bring that up? No, then I'd be one of those fucking, straight edge fucking knobs who goes, oh yeah, all you need to do is just cleanse yourself of all the fun in the world and then you'll be happy, right? Because I quit drinking nearly 2 years ago. I'm not happy any happier now than when I quit. But I'll tell you what, certainly external factors were reduced in my sadness, right? But in this scenario of going to see that mate, all of this catastrophizing is all unreasonable. It's all in the mind, right? And this isn't practical, right? It's certainly not something that I can act on. I can't just go up to this person and go, hey, I'm worried you might be an alcoholic, because then what do? They turn around and go, what do you mean? I've only had one, and then suddenly, it seems like you're on their case or something like that. And then the nature of the relationship changes. And this is all still catastrophizing, right? And you might recognize this sort of form of thinking, particularly if you're someone who ruminates a lot, if you're someone who, is quite melancholic quite often. Or hell, if you suffer from clinical depression, you might recognize these forms of thinking. So, yeah, there's internal and there's external factors, right? And they can all kind of cause different things within the brain. And it's hard to really, clasp exactly what they are, because, for instance, it's not a science, right? Therapy, psychology, obviously they're forms of science, but they're not like biology, they're not like physics, they're not like, the hydrogen atom has one proton and one electron, right? A helium atom has more than that, and then an iron atom has more than that, right? It's not like that. It's all, individual, because we are all a mass network of synapses and relays and things within the brain, releasing dopamine or serotonin or oxytocin or any of these things, right? We are all unique in the pattern with which our synapses in our brain function, right? They might take the same sort of general pattern, the front cortex, the back cortex or whatever, right? They all might be in the same place, but they will all act differently. Some will be more, impactful than others. Certainly some people are more observant than other people. Some people are more outgoing and social than other people. Some people are more, retentive of information, right? And some people are more, emotionally vulnerable, right? Some people are more sensitive emotionally, right? And we are all unique in that sort of way. And that's completely fine. I'm glad that we have this diversity of thought, right? It's very, very important in a civilization, right? But it becomes hard to actually narrow in on what the cause of your sadness is. Oftentimes, life can kind of feel like you're just hanging on the edge, right? And you don't really know exactly how to quantify that into words that feel meaningful, right? So I've set up this little metaphor here, right? So obviously, if I fall into this river, I'm going to get wet, right? My phone's going to get wrecked, right? My cards in my wallet are going to get a bit fucked. I'm going to probably have to like mail off for new cards and stuff, shut down my card with my bank and all that. Be a nightmare, right? And it's a weekend as well, so I'm going to have to wait until Monday for all that to happen. So there's 2 days of waiting for the banks to open and everything to open up again. So that's going to be quite annoying, right? The reason I'm doing this is because with sadness or depression or whatever you might want to call it for you, right, it can be very hard to put into words how you're feeling, which is why so many people sort of scurry around the topic and don't really like to talk about it, right? And also because it can feel a little bit uncomfortable to hear someone that you care about say that they're going through a hard time or that they're feeling really down or anything like that. It can feel really bad because, from your point of view of being their friend, you're thinking, well, I'm their friend and I don't want them to be sad, I like to think that I'm bringing light into their world and making them happier, right? So, and they're still sad. Am I not doing a good enough job of making them, being a good friend and making them happy and stuff, yeah? But that's not how it works inherently, right? Because, as I said, synapses in the brain, right? They all work differently for every single different person out there, right? And in there are millions upon millions of different variations. In fact, variation-wise, there must be trillions upon trillions of different personality types from every different, categorization and organization of the synapses in your brain. There must be so many different, equations that you can make into different people, right? We try and narrow things down with like personality types, like int J and like all of these sort of different things, right? But it's very hard to actually get across the internal and individual experience, whether that be happy or sad. Happier is certainly easier on a social level because we like to talk about positive things, right, with other people because it makes us seem like, one, maybe we're better or more interesting than we like to think we are. So we like to, almost brag about our good experiences. And two, it's also just more comfortable to talk about the time you had a load of fun compared to the time when you were really sad. Because people don't like a misery guts. People don't like people that are just bringing the mood down all the time. People want to be happy. People don't want to be sad. And focusing on the sad makes people around you sad by proxy. Right? So that's why generally, this is never really talked about, right? Outside of, dedicated discussions to the topic. And I find that it's hard to put into words sort of what it is that I'm feeling, right? I remember when I used to work in a warehouse in 2017, I used to get a bus there and it went through a really miserable industrial estate and I had to get off at the industrial estate and then walk through this industrial estate, like hopping in between lorries and stuff like that. And there was so much like sound of drilling and noise and like petrol fumes everywhere, and shouting all over the place in different languages. I hated it. It felt miserable. It felt like a nasty environment. And the environment was bad and it was making me sad. And the job that I was going to was a job that I fucking hated, right? So it fit, right? All the pieces kind of came together. And I almost look back on that industrial estate with a little bit of nostalgia because I used to put on history podcasts from Dan Carlin, right? And I would listen to, he would talk about the Blitz, he would talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis, about ancient Rome and stuff like that. And I found it all really interesting. And I would listen to these podcasts to and from my work or my commute, right? So that bad memory, I never enjoyed these times, right? Outside of just listening to the podcast was quite nice, but the actual experience of being on the bus and all this sort of stuff, I didn't like it. But it's remained a powerful memory for me. And the reason is, I think, is because the external factors and the internal factors were coalescing to create an experience that felt truly easy to convey, right? In a practical sense, it was easy to convey the emotions, right? Obviously, I felt sad, I felt overworked, I felt like that my life wasn't going anywhere, right? Even though I was only fucking 18. I felt really down as well. I felt like I was being overworked. I felt like I was missing out on parties and stuff that I could be going to because I was 18, There was all sorts of different reasons that I felt down, And that industrial estate was really able to encapsulate how I felt. And I'll never forget that industrial estate for as long as I live, right? So in terms of writing down how you feel. I find that journaling or diary entrying, right, or maybe writing short stories that are evocative of how you feel, these are all very, very good things to do, right? I would strongly recommend that you start a journal, right? You can even just do it on your phone right now, right? If you're watching this on YouTube on your phone, there's some way you can split the tabs. So just get Google Keep up underneath, right? Or whatever you use, and just start typing, right? Doesn't have to be sensible, doesn't have to be logical, doesn't need to be profound or anything like that, because you're not going to show anyone this. It's just for you, right? Just to encapsulate in a time capsule how you feel at this very moment, right? And obviously you'll never accurately depict how you feel, right? Because if I ask you now, how are you feeling? And you go, fine. I'll go, no, come on, seriously, we're doing a video about depression, sadness and all this shit. How are you actually feeling? Oh, sad. Yeah? Well, you know, I don't know, all of this stuff in the news is kind of getting me down. Okay, that's an external factor, very easy to encapsulate, right? Great. What else? I don't know, I'm not doing very well at school. Oh, that's another external factor. Give me an internal factor. Why do you feel down? Well, I don't know, I'm very judgmental of other people, but I never actually bring out these judgments. I always just sort of feel them and think them, but I never say them because I know that being a judgmental person isn't a good trait. So I try and not be judgmental, but I can't help it because sometimes people just really annoy me. Well, that is certainly an internal factor, the self-loathing that comes from the judgment, right? You don't like the fact that you're judging other people, right? And you want to stop. But an external factor, not completely an external factor, it's kind of both actually, right? But, you know, how you feel about other people, you know, is certainly internal. For instance, sometimes people do stuff that might be a little bit cringeworthy, right? But it's not actually harming anyone, you know? Sometimes someone will send a meme that's not very funny, or someone will tell a joke that's not very funny, or someone will tell a story that goes on a bit too long, or someone will ask you, or someone will say, like, I don't know, Avengers 2 is their favourite film ever, or something like that, and you'll think, they don't have a very, you know, in-depth sort of knowledge of film, do they? Or, their music taste is a bit boring, isn't it? Or, they're a bit naive. And these are all quite negative things to think about other people, right? So we try and shut them down, right? We try and press these sort of feelings out of us of judgment, right? In terms of this, like, metaphor, this idea, this example, right? And you kind of think, right, well, if you're not going to be judging other people, right, what are you going to be doing instead? Because you see some people out there that are just like the shining light beacon on humanity, that are just so positive and so wholesome and so endearing all the time that you think, how the fuck can they do that, right? I don't know, but I do know that the answer isn't to try. The answer is not to try to be that person, because then you'll just be not only kind of irritating in the way that some of these sort of types can be, with just how overbearing they are with their positivity, you'll also not even be genuine with it, right? So in terms of putting down how you feel into words, right, whether you want to write the words down or just say them to another person, right, it's not easy. And I don't necessarily know if it's doable, but you can certainly try and you can certainly get close. So how am I going to get up here? If the camera was more pointed at me, this would be a good metaphor. Trying not to get my trousers wet. Did it! Have you ever heard someone say, you're not depressed, you're just an attention seeker? Because I have. And it's a saying that I've thought about quite a lot, right? So first off, let's break it down, right? What are they saying? They're saying two things. One is you're not depressed, and the second is you're an attention seeker, right? So let's talk about attention seeking. I knew someone who was a big attention seeker. They were called Janet. They were a girlfriend of one of my mates about 8-9 years ago. And they made up really weird lies all the time. All the time. And these lies could encapsulate, very little things like she would say, oh, the Big Mac is my favorite burger, and then she would never get a Big Mac. Or she would say, oh, she hates chicken, and then, people would say, oh, do you want to go to KFC? She'd be like, yeah, go to KFC. Doesn't make any sense, right? And then, for some reason, larger lies started to come into the picture. So first off, she said that she was pregnant. And I don't know how she expected that one to last, because pregnancy goes on for 9 months. And after 9 months, no baby. Lie kind of falls in on itself. And then after that, she lied about having pancreatic cancer and saying she only had a month to live, which is a bit foolish, because, like, what's going to happen in a month? You know what I mean? So, yeah, I didn't really understand why she was lying, but I have a theory, and this is pure, like, armchair psychology, this is, but I think that she didn't have a very stable emotional sort of framework around her externally, like friends, family, people in positions of power, like the school nurse or the therapist, or that one teacher that you like to have long conversations with, where you can talk to them about your feelings, entering the world and all that sort of stuff. Maybe she didn't have that, and so she was trying to make up for it by getting some kind of sympathy from people, and she felt like she had to manufacture that sympathy, because she probably felt like she didn't have anything worth actually complaining about. So if anything, I feel like sort of people saying, oh, you're just an attention seeker, is kind of what causes attention seekers of that caliber to go around. And they are quite problematic. And they are probably what people are talking about when they think of an attention seeker. If you say to someone, oh, you're just an attention seeker, that's the kind of thing that you're probably thinking of, right? You're probably not thinking of someone saying, oh, I've been feeling really down lately. I'm wondering if I'm a bit depressed. And then they go, no, you're not depressed, you're just an attention seeker. You're not fucking depressed, right? So you're not depressed, right? A lot of people will sort of say you're not depressed as a sort of a form of competition, because there are people maybe like in the middle of some village in Somalia that are living in a hut with like one meal a week, right, and feeling pretty grim about it. You know those like kids with the giant stomachs that you see on adverts that are trying to make you feel bad, right? So you give them a load of money. It's sort of like that. That person is in that situation. You'd think they'd be really depressed, right? You're in a much better situation. You've got iPods, you've got telly, right? You've got billboards. What have you got to be sad about? That's kind of where the thinking comes from. And I don't accept that thinking, because mental health, positive and negative, is not a competition, right? It just isn't a competition at all. So in both positive and negative sort of emotions, you can have this sort of sense of competition, right? So first off, positive, right? Say you're at the office or something like that, and you're having some kind of team building exercise, and you have to go around and say, what's the craziest thing you've ever done, right? And someone will say, oh, I've been scuba diving. Someone will go, oh, I don't know, toured Africa, something like that, right? And then you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh, I don't have anything nearly as good, right? My life is kind of worthless, right? So first off, the competition has caused negative feelings, even though all we're doing here is sharing positive traits or positive feelings that we've had in our past, right? And negative feelings aren't a competition either, because no one wants to be the most depressed person in the world. Imagine you got a Guinness World Record for world's most depressed man or woman, right? You wouldn't feel good about that. You'd feel fucking awful, which I suppose is why you won the award. So what I don't understand is why there's this sort of sense of competitiveness around mental health. I detest it, right? Because you know what? People are the way that people are, right? You're sad, you're content, you're quite happy, right? We're all our own individual people in our own individual worlds, and those worlds collide in the material world that we have all around us, where communities are formed, right? So you might be thinking, what is there to do in all of this? How can I make myself feel better, right? If I can't reach out to other people, right, for fear of being called an attention seeker, and I can't look within without ruminating, what can I do? So in that last segment that just happened there were an awful lot of technical issues that came about. So first off, I recorded a really good take that I was really proud of. And then I got to the end of the take and I found out I wasn't recording on this. So I was really irritated and really crestfallen because of it. So I started recording it again, right? And in the second take, started getting a bit of an issue with a dog. A dog was just standing around here, right, not moving for about 5 minutes, whilst the owner kept going, "Collie, collie, collie," like again and again and again, right, until she had to come right up to the camera and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry about all this." I go, "No, you're fine." Like, it didn't interrupt things, but when I was already quite down, having already failed, I shouldn't have even been there at that point. I should have packed on and moved on to the next location. It made me feel a little bit down. It made me feel a little bit hopeless, right? I was like, what if I don't get this video finished? Am I really capable of making good videos anymore? Oh God. Do you see what I mean? Everything sometimes feels a little bit hopeless, right? And you know, I struggled through. I managed to come out of a take it's not the best take, but it's usable, right? And that's what matters, right? Is that I got through the situation, right? It's not about, you know, getting through everything completely unscathed. It's about being able to bandage yourself up properly and continuing on no matter what, right? So for the past few months, I've been feeling quite down, quite chronically down, right? Quite tired all the time, feeling like I'm lazy, feeling like the world around me is falling apart as I start to find it hard to make these videos anymore, or I have issues at work, right? Anything like that, right? Anything goes wrong, right? It starts to feel like it's one domino that all the other dominoes are soon going to fall after it. But it's not how the world works. The world isn't completely interconnected in that sort of way, right? Sure, the butterfly effect is something that I do believe in, but that's on the time scale of, you know, generations. That's not, you know, I throw a pebble in that direction and then on the way home I get hit by a car. That's not what it means. It's that when things can feel hopeless, right, there's no escape, right? It feels like anything you try and do doesn't work, and there'll be no way out, no matter what, right? No matter how unreasonable that might seem, no matter how fantastical the idea of no escape possible could even be, right? It perpetuates incessantly and it doesn't stop. And you want it to stop. You want nothing more than for it to stop. But it seems like at a certain point, maybe you're doing this to yourself. You're almost self-sabotaging at things. And then you think, maybe this is what I want. Maybe this is what I deserve. And as time goes on, you start to justify your own downfall until you have nothing left. At least that's the narrative. But I don't believe that that's the reality. The reality is things are a lot better than they may seem because we like to focus on the negatives, apart from when we talk about ourselves and when we think about our own mental health. Then we want to play this pretend game of everything being perfect all the time. We want to act like we're all fine, we're all marching through. We're all stoics in this landscape, right? There's no, you know, vulnerability required because I'm not vulnerable, right? I don't want to be vulnerable, right? That's sort of how it can feel. And that's not good. It's not good for people who, you know, feel like they might have something to say, to sit there in silence while other people talk just for the sake of talking, right? And for people where it might feel completely hopeless, I don't have any easy answers for you. You're going to have to find those for yourself. And I don't mean an easy answer. You're not going to have to find your own easy answers because there aren't any, right? But you know that because you're not stupid. You've sought them out before and you've been burnt touching the fucking iron stove. You've learned it the hard way, right? And you're trying to learn it the easy way. But there's something in your mind that just makes you think, if I go touch it again, what if I try and find some kind of all-encompassing reason that I am the way that I am, right? So while I've been quite down these past few months, I've gone through a variety of different things. I thought I had an iron deficiency, so I went and got some really big tablets, right? And they weren't helping. They started giving me heart palpitations, so I packed those in. I thought maybe it's I need a bit of iron, but not that much. I also need a load of vitamins, including vitamin D, vitamin D3, vitamin B12, vitamin B2, coenzymes, zinc, vitamin C, etc, etc, etc. So you get this big tablet thing and you put all the different vitamins in there. You start taking those every day. Doesn't seem to be working. Maybe the answer is I need to be more impulsive with life. So you start being more impulsive and it doesn't bring you any happiness. It's just suddenly now you have to deal with the consequences of your actions that you took impulsively. So you're trying all these different things and nothing's quite working. You even start doing the things that you're meant to do, you know? You go to therapy, you go to the gym, you know? You go outside more, you take walks in the woods, because all the fucking self-help gurus will say, oh, just walk in nature, and nature's so beautiful that you'll feel amazing. And it's like, no, right? Yeah, go for your walk in nature, but don't treat going for a walk in nature like it's gonna sort everything out for you, because it's not, right? It's just putting yourself in a nicer situation, a nicer scenario, a nicer environment, right? Just giving you a bit of a change of pace, right? It might make you feel good for a brief moment, right? But it's not an easy answer. You can't just keep going to the woods to solve your issues, right? So what can you do? What is the core of all your issues? There isn't one. It's not like your mind is a planet with an internal core and a crust, right? Your brain is almost like quicksand, right? And you're slowly sinking into the quicksand and you don't want to drown. So you have to find some way of recontextualizing this metaphor. It's not quicksand, it's something else. What is it? Something crumbling? No, I don't want that. Something with a core? No, I don't want that. Something like this? No, that's gonna... Then any sort of way that you frame your brain, right, I think might be too much. Maybe the truth to it is just to think a little bit less, you know, to not worry quite so much. And obviously you know that's the answer, but you obviously know that that's not just easily achievable, right? Oh, just turn your brain off. It's not as easy as that, is it? Right? It's quite difficult. So what can you do? I don't know. I don't know how to help you, right? I can't even help myself. I feel hopeless. I feel like I'm constantly slipping into the void. But you know what? For some reason, I love to keep getting up every day and trying again. Even if today doesn't work, tomorrow might, right? And even in my deepest, darkest moments where I feel like that's not true, I kind of know deep down that it is. Because the bad doesn't last forever. Neither does the good. But the bad doesn't last forever, you know? And how fantastic is that? You know? You don't go to an eternal hell, right? No matter what your external circumstances are, you'll have good days, right? That kid knocking about in Somalia, right, in a hut, right, who people will be saying, oh, you're not depressed. Look at him, he should be depressed. He's got a reason to be depressed, right? If you look at him, he'll have a best day of his life, right? He'll have a fond memory that he really looks back on. And a new one will come, a new best memory will form, right? You're not past your peak. One of the best days of your life might be just around the corner. It might be next year. It might be next month. It might be tomorrow. You don't know. I'll tell you what, the night that I met my girlfriend, I was miserable during the day, and I met her about 5:30. Suddenly it all turned around. I was going to a concert to meet my girlfriend, well, to meet someone at the time who I didn't know. It was a friend of a friend. And that friend was late, so me and this woman, we had to meet up, right? And I was feeling pretty down. I wasn't feeling very social. I felt a little bit shit, right? I didn't think this was going to be a good day. But you know what? I came out of that day thinking it's one of the best days of my life, because things can change at the drop of a hat, right? All that needs to happen is your external and your internal factors change, right? And you can change your external factors, right? Most of them. You can't change all of them. You can't change your parents. You can't change your school. You can't easily change your job or just move house or whatever. But you can force yourself into weird little situations, right? I'm gonna take yourself down to the cafe, right? Get something cheap on the menu and just sit there, right? Just read a book or something like that. That's quite relaxing, isn't it? It's quite, nice, candid. But what is there for you to do? Because you can't just pull yourself up, dust yourself off, and just move forwards. Because clearly, if you're watching a video like this, you're thinking too much. And you can't just stop yourself thinking, because the thinking is who you are. And there's no solution that is easily, figured out in some YouTube video. But I think what's important is just to know who you are. Know what you like, what you dislike, what kind of people you want to be around, what kind of people you want to avoid. What kind of places do you like to go to? Do you like libraries? Do you like museums, right? I like libraries, not massively keen on museums, right? I know that about myself, right? And I like to answer these little questions about myself, right? And I think it's important that you do that. Learn who you are, and then you'll be able to understand yourself. And the more you understand yourself, the better you'll be in the long run. I tend to catastrophize quite a lot. I often see the worst case scenario on the horizon, and I'll materialize it as much as I can in my brain and play out little scenarios where everything falls apart and everything goes wrong. And I know it's not healthy. And when I catch myself doing it, I say to myself, it's a fake conversation you made up in your head. It's a fake conversation you made up in your head. Stop it now, right? And a part of me doesn't want to stop. It's almost like it wants to stew in its own sadness. And I imagine that's probably quite a common thing for people, right? You know, you don't want to, stop. You don't want to be sad, but also, say someone could offer you a pill that just takes away all your sadness. I don't know, those kind of exist, don't they? Antidepressants and stuff like that. But I really wouldn't want to touch one, because I've heard lots of different things about, how they can be bad for you, or like they can mess you up and stuff like that. I'd be terrified of that. But say there was one where it was just like guaranteed to work. It's almost like that sort of a psychological idea of like you get in the tank and they put you into this dream world. You don't know you've been put in a tank, and nothing's real anymore, but it's your dream life that's being lived. You wake up and everything you could ever want is right there, right? But none of it's real anymore. Most people wouldn't want to get in the tank, I imagine. So by the same token, it's sort of like, is the sadness who you are? And I think that's not exactly constructive thinking, because certainly in my brain at least, I tend to think via sentences and via different, let's call them voices, of like one sort of like idea springs up and then an opposing idea will sort of spring up. Say, do I want to go to McDonald's or KFC? Right? McDonald's has that sort of thing that I quite like. KFC's got that thing I quite like. Kind of like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, what do I want? What do I want? And the cases for both are both being presented. You could get the spicy bean wrap or whatever. You could get 2 chicken for £2.50. That kind of thing. And that's kind of how my brain works. And that's a very basic example, but that applies to everything, right? And I wouldn't want my brain to stop working like that, even if it meant that I would be truly happy. Because what is true happiness if I'm not there, the me that I know and understand, if it's not there to experience it? Because I have felt euphoria, I felt supreme happiness, right? So I know that it's possible. I don't want to change who I am on a core level, right, without some kind of personal development involved. Because obviously, as time goes on, we'll gradually change, and things about us will change and all that sort of stuff. That's totally fine. But just to flick a switch and just become happy, I worry that my personality would be intertwined with the sadness. And is that maybe part of the issue? That we've commodified our own sadness into art and to things that we can express in these sort of manners through music or film, right? Because what artist has ever lived a perfect life with no hardships and gone on to create a masterpiece? People like to hear some kind of story or hardship that was overcome. I'm a big fan of Madhu Mukhtar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, so obviously I'm not that big a fan, but I like some of the songs. And like Tantalised, I really like that one, especially the live at KEXP version. And with him, he grew up in, I think it's Mali, and they banned guitars, they banned musical instruments when he was a kid. So he lost his guitar, and had to build a new guitar out of a bucket and string. He only had one string on it, and that's how he learned guitars, by playing that. And then somehow he moved over to America, and formed a band. And I think he moved back to Mali because they reneged on the law. The accuracy isn't the point here. The point is that is a story of hardship, someone overcoming something challenging, an external factor, and rising above it, right? And forging out their own path for themselves, right? And I look up to him dearly. He's a fantastic musician, and I think the story is really inspirational, right? But say if Madhu Mukhtar hadn't been brought up with all of that hardship, say he'd been brought up in an upper middle class sort of family in Ipswich, right? Without, you know, any real problems to his name. He didn't get bullied. He never had an alcohol problem. He never had a drug problem. Never been heartbroken, right? Everything always seemed to sort of work out for him. What story is there to tell? What is there to convey emotionally, other than the idea of things generally being fine? Would I be as into Madhu Mukhtar if not for his story? Because there's plenty of generic psych rockers out there. So maybe your sadness is intertwined with your personality, but that doesn't mean you can't detangle it and slowly but surely forge your own path out of your internal mind. Because these are internal factors: depression, sadness, chronic sadness, as I've been calling it through this. These are all, at the end of the day, maybe they were caused by external factors, right? But they are internal events. Like Madhu Mukhtar, right? When the guitars got banned in his country, how do you think he felt? Sad, gut-wrenchingly awful, right? Probably felt miserable because of it, right? Probably felt really bad, right? It wasn't like guitars got banned, so he just thought, right, guitars have been banned, okay, I had better build a bucket. Ding, 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 ding. Ah, okay, I'm going to America. Would you like to form a band? Yes. Ah, guitars are no longer banned in my home country of Mali. I will return. Whoosh. And then you're back in Mali just playing a load of gigs in the desert. That's not how it works, you know. He obviously felt something. He felt emotions when external things happened to him, right? And external things have happened to you too, and they have caused you to feel internal emotions. And you will find an internal escape to internal problems that have been caused by external situations and events. So, yeah, you'll be all right. There's a saying I quite like, because I listened to Mark Kermode's film review. I think it's stolen from The Exorcist. It's, everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. I love that saying. And I feel like I've gone through many of my own ends, many of my own beginnings, and many a time where that saying has helped me out and made me feel better about myself, made me feel better about my situation, because everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right now, that just means it's not the end yet, but it will be. And then after that, a new beginning will forge. And then sure, new hardships will come down the line, but you can figure them out when you get there, because you've grown, you've developed through the things through the trials and tribulations that you've gone through up until this point that have made you a stronger person than who you were before. So you'll be able to more easily overcome the hurdles and the obstacles and the hardships that are yet to come for you, because life isn't an easy ride by any stretch of the imagination, right? And you internally certainly not making it any easier, and you're aware of that. But everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. You will get there. You will make it. You will achieve what it is you want to achieve, even if it doesn't look the way that you envisioned. It will work out. Because I trust you. And that's pretty much it from me. So thank you very much for watching this video, everybody. I hope you managed to get something out of it. I hope you're feeling better coming out of this video than you did going in. I hope you feel some kind of inspiration or motivation to go out there and achieve your dreams, right? Even if you know that they're not going to look exactly the way that you kind of envisioned in your mind. They'll certainly happen if you keep pushing, right? And I know it's hard, and I know that, you know, everything might feel like it's collapsing on top of you at times. Certainly I understand that feeling, but it's not nearly as hopeless as you might think, right? Things are going to be all right, right? So, yeah. Leave your comments below about this video. What do you think of it? You know, if you have anything you want to respond to, anything you think I got wrong or right, you know, just let me know, because I'd love to hear your thoughts, right? Because certainly, oh, a little metaphor here, sometimes it can feel like you're tracing through mud, right? Just because it's a bit muddy there, I thought, you know, my shoes are muddy now anyway, I might as well get some use out of it for the video. So, yeah, I don't know. If you like this kind of thing, let me know what you'd like to see next. I've got a few ideas for more long form videos in this exact sort of style. There's another one that I did about living life as fulfillingly as possible. That one's worth watching as well. I'd also like to make some more mental health sort of related ones about different sort of topics. This is kind of just an overview of depression, chronic sadness, whatever it is. Certainly I feel like I could do this video in a few different ways and tackle it from different angles, because there's certainly something interesting. There's more to explore here. But for now, it's drawing to a close, this video. It's getting dark and I want to go home. So, yeah. Again, thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts. And also, if you're interested in being a part of the email band, email me at officialmorrisonfilms@gmail.com. That's officialmorrisonfilms@gmail.com. Right? So what is the email band? Essentially, I'm trying to forge this kind of community together where we make songs together, right? Someone will post, like, I don't know, a drum loop, and then we use that drum loop, someone comes up with some guitar chords on it, and then both of those get conjoined and then sent to someone else who maybe does some keyboard over it, and that gets sent to someone who maybe chucks a bass line on it, and that gets sent to someone who writes a few lyrics up and puts some lyrics to it. And then as time goes on, we build up more and more of these songs. We can try and release them onto Bandcamp or something like that, and all the proceeds can go to some charity. I have the idea that it go to like really small sort of charities where, you know, the 50 quid that we make will actually make a difference, you know, like, I don't know, get some well built, you know, in Nicaragua. Actually, I think they're finer water. Where's one in Chad? Get one built in Chad, because that's in the desert, isn't it? So, you know, probably quite hard to get water there.